Welcome to the last Pokemon Platinum video of the year. This is the conclusion of my very first year playing this game, and as a result I think it's good to go back and look at how much my skill has improved, and revisit one of the Pokemon that I played as a part of the initial mini-series for this game last year. So today I'm going to play Arceus, and I'm also going to play Giratina for a second time, and put these two against each other to see which one is better for a solo challenge in Pokemon Platinum. These are the rules, check them out in case you're not familiar with my content. By the way, in Pokemon Platinum, I am always evolving in my playthroughs, obviously not relevant today, and I'm also always using hardy natures, so if you're curious about those things, it's just part of the initial rule set. Keeps things a little bit simpler for myself while I'm learning a new game. Okay, so Arceus has a base stat total of 720, and it has 120 in every single one of its stats. This thing is completely busted. It does have a slow growth rate, which should hold it back to some extent, but I think its stats are gonna more than make up for that. This is where we start getting to what is really interesting about this Pokemon. Number one, its move pool is so expansive. I actually can't fit all of its moves onto the right-hand side of the screen. Right now, we are only looking at the TMs that it learns. This video would probably be like 3 hours long if I read out all of the good moves that it gets, so I'm not going to. If you can think of a move that's good, like Ice Beam, yes, Arceus learns it. Let's do another one. Swords Dance. Yes, Arceus learns it. Anyways, it learns almost everything, and I think that plays into its unique ability, multi-type. This ability is pretty simple. It changes its type based on the plate that Arceus is currently holding. This means it can be whatever typing it wants to be, gaining the same type attack bonus on any of its diverse moves. This also means it's going to be a very unique Pokemon to do a solo challenge with, because unlike other Pokemon like Giratina for example, which is going to be weak to Candace's ice types, Arceus technically never has to be weak to the opponent's Pokemon. I can always change its type to get a type advantage. So today I have access to a unique type of strategy that I normally don't have. If I was playing a Nuzlocke or something like that, I could always switch out and use a Pokemon that's strong against my opponents, but typically I'm not able to do that. I just have to go into the battles with a disadvantage and see if I can find my way through. That said, Arceus' ability to change types does depend on where the plates are located, so I'll be going through those throughout the video so that all of you are aware where each one of them is. Unfortunately, some are only available in the post-game once Cynthia is defeated, so I won't be able to change into certain types. Now, while Arceus is a really unique Pokemon, Giratina is also pretty unique. It has a really cool typing, Ghost Dragon. It does have the slow growth rate mirroring the other legendary, but its base stat total is slightly lower at 680. It has 150 HP, 100 attack and special attack, 120 defense and special defense, and 90 speed. But that's going to be more than enough to outspeed most targets in the game. Platinum, like Emerald, has AI-controlled Pokemon that are very slow. Giratina, unlike Arceus, has a move pool that actually fits on the right-hand side of the screen. It starts with Dragon Breath and Scary Face, then gets Ominous Wind, Ancient Power, Dragon Claw, Shadow Force, Heal Block, Earth Power Slash, Shadow Claw, and Aura Sphere. It's a pretty good set. The fact that I'm a slow growth rate means we're probably never going to get past level 70, so moves like Shadow Claw and Aura Sphere are not going to be relevant. It gets a good amount of coverage through TM and HM, Thunderbolt, Earthquake, Psychic, Steel Wing, and Charge Beam. And it also gets the same type attack bonus moves Dragon Claw, Shadow Ball, Dragon Pulse, and Shadow Claw. I kind of wish that Giratina had a more interesting ability. Pressure just depletes the opponent's PP twice as fast, and while this is useful if the battle ever becomes a stall fest, it's not going to be useful today because I doubt that Giratina is going to... Actually, I know that Giratina is never going to have to stall the opponent out. I played this thing last year, like I said, and it completely crushed the game. If we bring up my current tier list, it's no longer in first place, but I think that's largely because my skills have improved since I played it. Right now it's behind Garchomp, Shaman Sky, Lucario, and Shaman Land, with a time in the S tier of 2 hours, 20 minutes, and 50 seconds. But this brings up a problem with my current tier list implementation. 2 hours and 30 minutes makes no sense as a threshold for the S tier. Pokemon regularly are getting times under that when they don't deserve to be the top performers overall. So I need to rebalance my thresholds for 2025, and I might as well do that now in the last video of 2024. The current thresholds right now have a lowest time of 2 hours and 30 minutes with the highest time of 3 hours and 45 minutes. Honestly, I think going into the series on both ends, I did not estimate these time ranges very well. S-tier Pokemon are probably going to be getting times under 2 hours eventually in the future, and the results of Torterra and Luxray in the F-tier are probably some of the worst we're going to get when considering full evolutionary lines. I think everything will change when we consider first stage Pokemon exclusively, like how well does Shinx do in a Pokemon Platinum playthrough? It's gonna be over 4 hours, believe me. For now though, in 2025, I just want to rebalance things with the results that I have so far, and move most of the Pokemon out of the S tier in light of Garchomp's results from yesterday, which was under 2 hours. That said, this result was specifically with my second playthrough using the Pokemon, and it wasn't using evolution, so it's not really comparable to the other results in this tier list. As a result, I think it makes sense to rebalance the data so that Pokemon fit within the extents of the tier list, rather than moving everything down arbitrarily because of Garchomp's one result, which isn't going to be included here anyway. Just for a visual example of what that might look like, maybe the S tier is times under an hour and 50 minutes. If this is the case, then Pokemon like a Garchomp when evolving gets moved to the C tier, and that would currently be the best result that I would have achieved. This doesn't really feel like a good way to design the tier list, so I'm not going to do that. Instead, we'll lay things out like this, with Garchomp's current result being the top of the A tier with no Pokemon placed in the S tier. The time ranges for this are 210 for the S tier, 220 for the A tier, 230 for the B tier, and so on. You'll notice that the times that I use to encompass each tier become slightly larger as we get towards the bottom, just so that the tier list has a good distribution of Pokemon in every single tier, except the Impossible and the S tier, which I haven't found any Pokemon that fit within right now. But maybe today using Arceus, we just might get our first S tier placement. Okay, jumping back to basically the God Pokemon, let's talk about its starting moveset, which is really strange. Seismic Toss, Cosmic Power, Natural Gift, and Punishment. I think all of these moves deserve a description, so let's go through them one by one. Seismic Toss deals fixed damage based on the Pokemon's level. So at level 5, it's going to do 5 damage. At level 10, it's going to do 10 damage. Not very good, but I guess useful if I need to deal a specific amount to the enemy Pokemon. Cosmic Power is the simplest move on this set. It just raises defense and special defense by 1 stage. This move is fantastic as a Generation 2 backport, and it can be really useful in Pokemon Emerald, but I don't think it's going to have much of a place in Platinum. Mostly just dead weight right now. Natural Gift is where things get really weird. This move is kind of similar to Hidden Power, but it inflicts damage, it has no secondary effect, but its type and power are dependent on the user's held berry. By the way, this move will consume the berry that the user is holding and fail if the user is not holding a berry. So unless I have the move Recycle, I can only use this move once in battle. It's kind of weird, but it gives good type coverage to any Pokemon. Here's the table from Bulbapedia. Here you can see all the different types and powers associated with each berry. So if I need a particular type coverage, I can always use this move to get it. And there's one trainer specifically that people have been recommending me use this move against. I'll talk about him later on. By the way, this move is fairly universally available because it's TM83, which can be purchased in the department store in Veilstone City. And now onto the final move that Arceus starts with, Punishment. It sounds like it would be its signature move, but it isn't. Judgment is its signature move. Punishment deals damage to the target, and its power increases from 60 by 20 for each stat stage that the opponent has above neutral. So let's say the opponent has +6 attack, well then it's going to get 20 times 6 plus the base 60 power. This would give it a modified base power of 180. It can go all the way up to 200 if the opponent has 7 positive stat changes, so like, I don't know, maybe +3 defense and +4 attack, something like that, but it can't go beyond that even if the opponent has more positive stat changes. When I sat down to play the game, I thought this move would be learned almost exclusively by Arceus, but actually a lot of Pokemon get access to it. The Mankey line, Sneasel, Lugia, and Ho-Oh, Slacking, Sableye, Infernape, and then Arceus. And that's just in Generation 4. Beyond that, more Pokemon do eventually get access to this move. So by no means is this an exclusive move to Arceus. Now it makes most sense for our normal type, at least as we start, to be facing Chimchar from the rival, so that he has fighting type moves which are super effective. But again, this interaction interaction has the ability to be inverted later on by me as I get access to more and more plates. Although, I don't have any of them yet. The first HM you receive in Pokemon Platinum is for Rock Smash, which Arceus can learn. So I'm going to teach this in the place of Seismic Toss, so I have a move that actually deals damage based on my stats rather than my level. Rock Smash also got a major buff in Generation 4. Its base power is not 20 anymore, it's now 40, and it still has a 50% chance to lower defense. I think this is going to be the perfect move to use to face Rourke. Geodude is first. I set up Cosmic Power here to increase my defensive stats for the remainder of the battle. Plus, Geodude can do almost no damage to me. Then, I start using Rock Smash and it takes a while because Rourke uses a potion. But eventually his lead goes down and I still have green health left over. Onix is next. I'm hoping to drop defense. By the way, if you're wondering why I'm not using super effective damage with Natural Gift, the reason is simple. There are no berries available at this point in the game. You have to beat the first gym leader to get access to them. Onix is of course terrible offensively. I do drop its defense by 2 stages and then knock it out. Cranidos is last. Rock Smash does a lot of damage because the prehistoric Pokemon doesn't have great defenses. It brings Arceus to orange health, but that's not enough. My second attack knocks it out and I earn myself the first badge. Now, Arceus's options really start opening up. I can get the TM for Rock Tomb inside the Ravaged Path. This I teach right away in the place of Cosmic Power. On the other side of this small cave area, I can also pick up the TM for Bullet Seed, but it only has base 10 power in Generation 4, so it's really not that good. What I'm much more excited for is Floroma Town, where I can collect a bunch of berries. An Oran Berry, a Cherry Berry, then inside of this shop I get a Rost Berry from one of the ladies, and on the next route I can pick up a Pecha Berry as well as a Chesto Berry. With these I have Natural Gift in Fire, Water, Electric, Grass, and Poison types. I tried this out against a random Galactic Grunt. Honestly, it doesn't really make sense to do it here because then my berry is used up and I can't use Natural Gift anymore. By the way, you're going to see a little bit of overlay wonkiness at the end of this fight, and I think that's a key moment for me to get into a little bit of the details of how Pokemon Platinum works. So the way this game works is it copies the data into 3 different locations in RAM, and it only updates one of these locations during the battle. After the battle has ended, then it copies that location back to the party structure. This is why the Pecha Berry briefly reappears, because my overlay is switching where it's looking at in RAM during this stage, and at the time the overlay does this switch, the data hasn't yet been copied back. I'm gonna have to clean this up in the future, but for now it's not really relevant. Next is Commander Mars. Rock Tomb one-shots the Zubat, and I move on to the Perugly. Rock Smash is pretty good here. It would have got a 3-hit, but I lower defense on the first turn, so it only takes 2. In Eterna Forest, I have a battle against a Pachirisu, one of my worst nightmares. This thing loves to paralyze me. Luckily today, I get through without the status condition. On the other side of the forest, I can pick up some more berries to power up Natural Gift, but then I also get the first plate in the entire playthrough, the Draco plate. This allows me to switch Arceus's type to the Dragon type, and this plate is immediately useful because the Dragon type resists the Grass type, and Gardenia is next. Her first Pokemon is Turtwig. As I send my Arceus into battle, you'll notice that the spikes on its back, like the things that usually are gold, have now changed color depending on the plate that I'm holding. They're this deep purple color when I'm a Dragon type. Quickly scanning all the moves she only has Grass and Poison type damage dealing moves, and the only one that has a Poison attack is Roserade, and it's just Poison Sting. Obviously a terrible move. I felt really confident in this battle, and then she surprised me. The Turtwig isn't really a problem, but I'm not doing much damage. I have learned Earth Power by this point, which is a special move. I'm using it because she set up Reflect. Rock Tomb can miss, and using Punishment doesn't make a lot of sense this early into the battle when it has 5 PP. I only have 2 left over by the time the Cherrim goes down, and then she sends in Roserade. I'm on orange health. This is not going the way I was expecting. Roserade paralyzes me, hits with Grass Knot, Earth Power isn't doing much, even though it's neutral, and yeah, Arceus gets its first reset here. That is really not what I was expecting. Okay, I come back and try again, this time using Rock Smash against the Cherrim, hopefully lowering its defense so that I can do more damage with a move like Rock Tomb or Punishment. Interestingly enough, this fight also doesn't go my way because the Cherrim uses Leech Seed and drains Arceus's health every turn. This move is way better than I gave it credit for when I was a kid. So that is my second reset with the Legendary. I thought the Draco plate was going to solve this fight, even though my moves are not particularly good here, but it's just not doing what I need it to do. All of my damage dealing moves are not effective enough, and Arceus can't really learn anything else. Well, there's one omission. I could have taught Return by this point in the game, but I do want you to remember that Arceus starts with 0 base friendship, so its friendship right now is only 101. If we divide that by 2.5, then the power of Return would only be 40 in this battle. So it would be the same power as Rock Smash, which is currently my weakest move. After trying and failing for a third time, I decided to go and grind. I have to face some wild Pokemon while doing this, so the going is slow. I level up over the next damage rounding threshold at 23, and I really didn't want to continue training to 25, so maybe, well hopefully, this is going to be enough for Gardenia. Well, in this battle I get a bit lucky. I'm able to two-shot the Cherrim now, and then against the Roserade, I get a critical hit with Earth Power, and that almost one-shots. It was so close. Roserade eats its Citrus Berry, paralyzes Arceus, and even with Leech Seed, it can't heal over half health. So with my next hit, I am going to knock it out. Arceus survives the Grass Knot, it isn't fully paralyzed, and it knocks Roserade out with one more Earth Power. Okay, this early game was a lot bumpier than I was expecting with Arceus. Like, it was genuinely quite slow. With Giratina, things start out much better. Number one, it has Dragon Breath, a same type attack bonus move that inflicts special damage, and this absolutely shreds the Geodude and the Onix on Rourke's team. The Cranidos survives more than 2 hits, so it takes the longest in general, but it's still not a threat. I didn't go through this section on minimum battles, but it was fairly close. I skipped most optional trainers. Now, Giratina doesn't get access to as many moves, but during the Rourke battle I did get access to Ominous Wind, which is a special ghost type move. Basically, I have a choice now between Dragon Breath or Ominous Wind, the second of which has the chance to Omni Boost all of my stats. Against Commander Mars, Ominous Wind two-shots the Zubat, unfortunately no boosts for me. I then switch over to Dragon Breath for the Purugly, and things get really close here because it's using Feint Attack, which is super effective. It brings me down to red health, but Giratina seals the deal with one final blow. Okay, Gardenia's next. Notice that I don't have the Draco Plate here. I should have the Draco Plate. I think it would make Dragon Breath much better. I'm holding the Cherry Berry just to play around Paralysis because the Roserade is not going to go down to a single hit. If you look at my PP, you'll see that I have depleted all of the uses of Ominous Wind. I was really trying to get an Omni Boost as early as possible, but I didn't get one. After knocking out the Cherrim, I level up, learning Ancient Power at level 20, so I could technically get an Omni Boost from this move, although it doesn't get the same type attack bonus, so I wanted to use Dragon Breath for more damage per turn. In the end, it's not actually enough, and I faint to the Roserade, taking my first reset here, just like Arceus. I tried again, and I still don't get the Omni Boost after 5 Ominous Winds. Roserade comes out and once again gives Giratina a second reset. These two are playing very similarly. Maybe I skipped too much training, like, I don't know, this battle shouldn't be this difficult. Finally, in my next attempt, I get an Omni Boost early on, and with +1 to all my stats, the Roserade is much easier, especially when, like Arceus, I get a critical hit. This time, though, I one-shot. Now I grab the Draco Plate, and I equip this item to boost the power of Dragon Breath up to 108. Inside the Old Chateau, I pick up the Substitute TM, which is very useful for Fantina, who's coming up soon. Although first, I have to defeat Jupiter, and I'm going to teach this move before I fight her because her Skuntank is actually quite scary with Night Slash. To avoid taking damage from it, or the potential for it to crit me, I set up Substitute against the Zubat. Giratina just barely doesn't one-shot, which is annoying, but I get it on the second turn. No Omni Boosts from Ancient Power, I move on to the Skuntank, go with Dragon Breath, it breaks my Substitute, uses its Citrus Berry, hits with Night Slash, bringing me to red health, and I don't think I have enough damage. But Dragon Breath paralyzes, Skuntank can't move, and as a result I attack again, finishing Jupiter off. This was a very lucky win. Okay, I'm ready to get frustrated because I have to jump over this little stupid ledge with the bike on 4 times speed. It is so difficult. I fumble multiple times before I finally get it and can grab the TM for Earthquake, which of course Giratina can learn. I'm not going to teach it right now though because all of Fantina's Pokemon have Levitate. Before I fight her, I want to do one preparation step, which is to go into Amity Plaza and grab the Spooky Plate, which boosts the power of Ghost type moves by 20%. And it's also going to let Arceus become the Ghost type, although I will have a better option available to me. Okay, time for Giratina and Fantina to go head to head. This one is really simple. Ominous Wind on the Dusclops. Yes, it's a Dusclops. I said that correctly. After that, Ominous Wind on the Mismagius. I run out of PP here, but it doesn't really matter because the Haunter that's last is just not very good. I set up Substitute to avoid Hypnosis, and then I win. Rival time. The Staravia, as usual, is the most important Pokemon on his team here. I set up my Substitute, and then the Staravia breaks it right away with a critical hit from Wing Attack. Are you kidding me? This thing is so annoying. It's caused multiple problems this year, and I expect throughout my challenges it's just going to keep causing them. Luckily, Giratina is very strong, and while it is taking damage, it just sort of muscles its way through this battle. Before Ace Trainer Dennis, a trainer that I always mention in my playthroughs, he's sometimes a problem. In this case, he isn't. Before the battle, though, I give up Substitute because it's kind of outlived its usefulness, at least in most of Pokemon Platinum runs. In its place, I put Earthquake, a fantastic offensive move, which is going to be helpful against Maylene, who's coming up next. This battle is so straightforward. One-shot the Meditite with Ominous Wind, three-shot the Machoke, but what's it gonna do to me? Use Rock Tomb, I guess, lowering my speed? Oh no, the Lucario moves first with Metal Claw and does like nothing to Giratina. And then Earthquake finishes it in 2 hits. I was expecting 1, but I'll take 2. I am under-leveled at this point. Her Ace is level 32, and my Giratina is only level 28. This just goes to show how few trainers I am fighting, and how the slow growth rate impacts a playthrough when you're skipping experience along the way. Coming out of this split, Giratina has a time of 48 minutes and 9 seconds. Let's now go to the Pokemon that's behind, Arceus. Yes, you heard me correctly. Just outside of the Old Chateau, I can pick up the Insect Plate, which will allow Arceus to convert itself to a bug type. I don't think that's going to be very relevant or useful, but maybe it will be against a trainer like Lucian. Honestly, he's pretty bad. I don't think it's going to be relevant. Inside the Old Chateau is a plate that is relevant though, the Dread Plate. This allows Arceus to become a dark type, and that's going to be fantastic against Fantina. This is the one that I alluded to earlier. I use it against Commander Jupiter to boost the power of Punishment, which now has an effective power of 108. I take care of the Zubat fairly easily, move on to the Skuntank, which is a poison type, so Earth Power is super effective. While I don't one-hit, Skuntank just misses and I knock it out. Just like with Giratina, I'm going to grab the Earthquake TM and teach it in the place of Earth Power. It's only a minor boost to power, but I'll take anything I can get. Before Fantina, I pick up the Spooky Plate, but I don't end up using it against her. Again, the Dread Plate is just better. Punishment is super effective, and even with its base power, this is more than enough when it gets the same type attack bonus. It now has an effective power of 216. I set up my Substitute so the Dusclops can't do anything to me, and then I knock it out, the Mismagius, and the Haunter. Simple win for Arceus. Okay, the rivals next. You'll notice that I've switched to the Spooky Plate here, so Arceus's golden spikes are now a dark purple color. This is in anticipation of the Maylene battle that's coming up soon. And luckily for me, no issues against the rival. As I pass through Salacion Town, I'm going to draw your attention to a plate that I'm not going to pick up. That is the Mind Plate. It's inside the ruins and it takes a lot of time to pick up, plus I don't need the Defog TM, so there's no reason to go in there. I also think the Spooky Plate for the Ghost type is just far superior to the Mind Plate when facing Maylene. Plus in synergy with the fact that I don't need the Defog TM, on the very next route I can pick up the Shockwave TM, which bypasses accuracy checks, so I can use this for the foggy areas. Okay, I have a hilarious reset to Ace Trainer Dennis. I can't believe I'm saying this. I kind of run out of moves that are good against him because Punishment has tiny PP. Like the old days, I'm having PP problems here. Haven't had these in a while. I reset, I go back into the battle after restoring my PP, but even that isn't enough. The Drifblim then gets me with Aftermath. I end up having to teach Arceus Shockwave so that it has a move that damages Ace Trainer Dennis's Pokemon decently well and has decent PP. This allows me to get by him, but I will admit, it was still not easy. I get through with only orange health remaining. It was here I had a chance to learn the move Hyper Voice, which I haven't used a lot before. I ended up teaching it in the place of Punishment because I really don't want to have to use Punishment anymore. It's caused some problems here and there, so good riddance. Maylene is next. The Spooky Plate ensures that she can't hit me with fighting or normal type moves, so she really has limited options and none of them do very much damage. As a result, Arceus takes a simple victory. Let's take a brief step back from these runs and compare how the two are doing. Right now, Giratina is in a commanding lead ahead of Arceus. So if I had to predict from here on out, it seems like the evil Pokemon is going to emerge victorious. Interestingly, if we look at the timeline graphs early into the playthrough, Giratina started off a little bit behind when compared with Arceus, but in the Gardenia split specifically is when it started to take a lead, and then it only built on that lead throughout the next section of the game. But maybe Arceus with the plates and multi-type can engineer some sort of comeback. Now let's talk about a bunch of the plates that I'm not going to be using in this run. You may have noticed that I didn't mention the Fist Plate, which is available just before Veilstone City. I actually skipped over it in this playthrough. I didn't think it was going to be very relevant, so yeah, we're not obtaining that one. Interestingly, in Generation 8 they added the Blank Plate, which boosts the damage of normal type moves. This one is kind of strange because Arceus is a normal type by default. So why did they add it? I guess for other Pokemon, that's all I can really think of. In Generation 6, they added the Pixie Plate, which of course boosts the damage of fairy type moves, so that one isn't available either. To make things even stranger, they introduced something called the Legend Plate, which has a very convoluted ability. I'll let you pause here and read it if you want to know what it does. Of course, it's not relevant today. As I arrive in Pastoria City, I could go to the Great Marsh and pick up the Toxic Plate, but changing into a poison type is generally not a good idea. Plus, Crusher Wake is coming up next. He's a water type specialist, so if anything, I would want to change into an electric type, but the Zap Plate is only available once I reach Sunyshore City. Well, that's not entirely true. I have completely skipped over one method to obtain these items, and that is to go to the underground and do the mining minigame. This would give me a chance of earning any of them at any point throughout the run. If this challenge was untimed, I think this would be the best way. As soon as I get the Explorer Kit, mine, obtain every single plate, and then when I'm facing an enemy, just be the type that resists their moves. The thing is, there are a total of 16 plates, so getting them all through the mining minigame is likely going to take a significant amount of time. Being on the clock, I didn't think this was a wise way of playing. If I need, for example, the Zap Plate to take on Crusher Wake, then getting it is a 1 in 16 chance, and I might be down there for a while. Hopefully you understand why I didn't choose to do things this way. Instead, I'm only going to be picking up the plates that are available on the map. Hopefully this never changes, but maybe with a Pokemon that's absolutely awful, I will have to go mining for a specific plate to solve some trainer in the future. The rival outside of Crusher Wake's gym is really easy. Shockwave can manage the Staravia for once, so no issues there. Then against Monferno, I have Earthquake. It doesn't actually get a one-hit, which I was a little bit surprised about, but after that, his remaining 2 Pokemon are easy to finish. Okay, now time for the Water-type Specialist. Crusher Wake leads with Gyarados, and I have Shockwave, so of course Arceus one-hits. In this case, I'm holding the Amulet coin just so I get more money from this battle. I might as well do something with my held item. Next is Floatzel. Shockwave does much more than half. It eats its Citrus Berry and then uses Crunch, getting a critical hit, but it only does 1/3, and I knock it out. Last is Quagsire. Maybe I could have taught Bullet Seed for this thing. I don't actually learn Grass Knot, so that's not an option. Either way, it's not really an issue. Hyper Voice can two-shot. Passing through the foggy area of the map is easy because I have access to Shockwave. This is also the location of the Meadow Plate, which changes Arceus into a grass type, but it requires Waterfall in order to obtain, so I can't get it right now. Next is Cyrus, and I actually used 6 rare candies, bringing Arceus up from level 39 to 45 before facing him. I played this run quite a while before I'm doing this voiceover. I played this one on June 29th, and I'm doing the voiceover now on October 25th. Because of that, I'm not entirely sure what my thought process was around using these rare candies. Yes, I am starting to feel sort of behind in the level curve, but this battle isn't difficult enough that I should have to use this many candies. After all, Sneasel takes super effective damage from Rock Smash, which has an effective power of 160. Now at level 45, Hyper Voice can one-shot the Golbat and the Murkrow that follows. Overall, I think this choice was a little bit reckless, and hopefully it doesn't come back to bite me later on. But I doubt that's going to be the case, because with this battle out of the way, I can fly back to Veilstone City, head over to the game corner, and purchase coins with all of the money I've earned with the Amulet coin. This allows me to buy the TM for Swords Dance, which Arceus can learn. This is by far one of the best moves in the game, and now I basically want to convert to a physical set so that I can utilize this move in combination with all of my attacks. For the rival in Canalave City, I have almost converted over, holding onto Shockwave just in case the Staraptor sets up too many double teams. Swords Dance can counter out its Intimidate. I go up to +1 and then knock it out. Heracross is next. Return gets the one-shot. This move gets the same type attack bonus too when I'm not holding any plates, so I'm still holding the Amulet coin. Earthquake one-shots the Infernape and the Floatzel, and Return takes care of the Roserade. Okay, time for Iron Island. This is where the Iron Plate is available, but this is another one I don't think Arceus really needs. Yes, the Steel type is fantastic defensively, but offensively it's not very good in these games. Instead of grabbing it, I'm just going to change up my moveset, teaching Aerial Ace in the place of Shockwave. This is a physical move that bypasses accuracy checks, and it probably would have been fine against the Staraptor. Okay, now let's head into the gym and talk about something I mentioned way earlier into the video. Where have people suggested that I use Natural Gift? And the answer is against Caesar's Scissor. This thing has been an absolute menace in my playthroughs up until now. However, if I go to the Veilstone department store, get Natural Gift, then equip the berry that makes it a fire type move, I should be able to one-shot the Scissor. Arceus doesn't have any problems today because Earthquake one-shots, so that's that. But I'm going to keep this solution in my mind for later because I think it will be relevant with other Pokemon that don't have good moves against steel types. But even when that's the case, you usually don't need something else against Byron. He is typically the worst gym leader in these playthroughs. His lead is Magneton. It looks like it's floating, but it doesn't have Levitate, so after one Swords Dance, I use Earthquake and knock it out in a single hit. By the way, if you're looking at me and thinking I'm at low health, yeah, that's because I didn't heal before this fight. The Magneton did do damage, but not very much. I one-shot the more defensive Steelix, and then move on to the Bastiodon. It has one more defense point when compared with the previous Pokemon, but this still doesn't allow it to survive one hit from Arceus. As expected, Byron was a pushover. Okay, Arceus is starting to get really dominant now, so let's switch back to Giratina. I think this is where it's starting to fall off. The early game was really easy, but this rival battle outside of Wake's gym is actually quite close. It takes me a really long time to manage the Grottle. Dragonclaw isn't doing very much as it sets up its defenses. I probably should have gone for Ominous Wind or Ancient Power to get around them. As a result, I am taken all the way down to 16 hit points before I knock it out. Luckily, only Ponyta is left and it doesn't have a priority move, so I can finish it in what I thought was going to be one hit. But with Earthquake, I don't actually have enough damage, so it survives and uses Ember, getting a critical hit. Luckily, Giratina resists this move, and it survives with 5 hit points and pulls through. Okay, I'm going to replace Ancient Power for Shockwave so that I have super effective damage against Wake. I also want to be able to use special moves here because Intimidate lowers my attack, and I have no way of recovering it currently. By the way, I'm just making a little insert here. You will have noticed that my Giratina was level 31 for the rival battle, and now it's level 41. I used a bunch of rare candies before this fight to ensure that I had the damage I needed to pull through. I did not want to get hit by super effective Ice Fang at a lower level. Floatzel is second. It uses Crunch, which is doing okay damage. I've learned Shadow Force by this point, which is a devastatingly powerful ghost type move. It does physical damage, not enough to knock out his ace, but after another Crunch, which I easily tank, then I knock it out. Last is Quagsire. I can use Shadow Force here to knock it out over 2 hits and win against Wake. Okay, time for more Pokemon that Giratina is weak to, like Cyrus's Sneasel. Luckily for me, my Dragonclaw gets a critical hit, so I never have to deal with getting hit by an Ice Punch. I also crit the Murkrow that follows, which is awesome. Move on to the Golbat. Unfortunately here, I don't get a critical hit, but Shadow Force still one-shots. Okay, are you ready for another rival battle that is kind of ridiculous? I am. So, Staraptor. I can use Shockwave to knock it out, and unlike Arceus, Giratina does not have access to Swords Dance, so no setup for Giratina from here on out. It just has to rely on Brute Force. And that's a problem for the Torterra, because it has Leech Seed, and it can drain a lot of health from me each turn. Using Shadow Force is not a great idea, because it takes 2 turns, so the Torterra heals twice. Eventually, I managed to take it down, but I'm not in a nice position. Shockwave fails to knock out the following Floatzel. Luckily, no Ice-type moves yet. It goes for Pursuit, which is super effective, bringing me down to red health, and then I knock it out. 2 more Pokemon, and I have 29 hit points remaining. Dragonclaw comes through again with another critical hit. Heracross faints, and that leads to only Rapidash. In this case, once again, Earthquake does not one-hit. I'm so confused about this. Then it uses Fire Spin. By the way, it's using fire moves because it only has normal moves other than that, which obviously don't do anything. This brings me down to 7 hit points, and Giratina would have pulled through if not for Fire Spin's secondary effect. The Vortex damage is what gives me a loss here. For the next battle, I switch up my plate, taking the Spooky plate in instead so that I can do more damage to the Torterra. I'm lucky enough to avoid Leech Seed this time around, and that makes all the difference. From here, I one-shot the Floatzel, and then his team just kind of falls apart. Okay, you know in Generation 1 where sometimes I just say Surge and then we cut to some other kind of footage? Yeah, I think I'm going to employ that method here, so Byron. Alright, coming up next is Candace. I want to check in with Giratina's speed stat. Right now it's 116, meaning it's going to move first against all of her Pokemon because the Frostlass has 115 speed. Something that does worry me though is that I used a bunch of my rare candies and I'm only level 50 by now. I think by the end of the game I'm going to be in the mid 60s, which is lower than I've ever ever completed Platinum in the past. Typically I'm somewhere in the mid 70s or low 80s by the time I'm facing Cynthia. Perhaps this is one of the first times outside of Pokemon that are terrible like Sudowoodo that I'm gonna have troubles in the late game. With this Giratina playthrough, I have been trying to cut trainers in order to go as fast as possible, so perhaps I'm gonna be punished for this later on, or maybe right now against Candace. Her first Pokemon is Sneasel. I go for Shadow Force and I don't one-shot. As a result, I take damage from Feint Attack before I knock out her lead. Frostlass comes in next. Luckily, Shadow Force has a ridiculous effective power here, although taking 2 turns against the Frostlass isn't a good idea, because then it raises its evasion with Double Team and I miss. I try Shadow Force again, and luckily I hit, knocking her ace out. Things get easier from here. Piloswine is next. I can use Shadow Force to one-shot it, and move on to the Abomasnow that's last. Shadow Force isn't able to one-shot, it goes for Avalanche, doing massive super effective damage. Giratina hangs on, survives the hail damage, and then she uses a full restore. This is a little bit of a problem. Hail is on the field, it was summoned by Snow Warning, so it's never going to go away, meaning Giratina is taking chip damage every turn. And I went for Shockwave to deal chip damage to the Abomasnow and knock it out. This puts me in a not great position. I have 23 hit points remaining, and the Abomasnow is in green health. I was pretty sure that Shadow Force was the only move that would knock it out from this range, so I go for it, take chip damage while I am vanished, and Giratina survives on 9 hit points. It hits Shadow Force and knocks the Abomasnow out. That was way too close. I probably should have tried to chip down the Abomasnow with a move like Earthquake or Dragon Claw. That would have been a far better idea. Despite type advantages, Giratina has no issues against Cyrus. His Sneasel is still not faster than I am, but the Crobat is. That said, it's not very good against my typing. At the top of Mount Coronet, Giratina doesn't have issues in the multi-battle, and it heads into the Distortion world to face Cyrus again for a third and final time. This is the only battle that Giratina is going to be in its origin form for because I'm in the Distortion world. Otherwise I'd have to be holding the Grisius Orb, which I don't have access to in one of these playthroughs. It's a post-game item. In this form, Giratina's defensive stats and attacking stats switch, so you can see here that it has more attack and special attack when compared with defense and special defense. I had originally thought that this would make this battle very easy, but in my run last year, I had 1 reset here, and things play out the same way this year. I'm using Shadow Force to do damage to Pokemon like the Crobat, and it uses Toxic just before I do that. Luckily, Giratina gets the KO, so I have a chance to use Shockwave on the Gyarados. Unfortunately, it doesn't do enough damage, and Giratina goes down to Ice Fang. I have 8 rare candies in my bag right now, so I'm going to use 6 of them to go all the way up to level 60 before trying Cyrus again. Last year I used rare candies up to 63, so I am 3 levels lower than I was last time, and my time is better. Beating him last year I had a time of 1 hour 56 minutes and 5 seconds with 5 resets. This year I have a time of 1 hour 43 minutes and 32 seconds with only 4 resets. So a year of experience has made me 12.5 minutes faster. I'm just hoping that I can hold this lead throughout the remainder of the game. Of course, Volkner's not going to cause any issues. He is terrible as a gym leader in these solo runs because you are so over-leveled by the time you face him. And that's because Cyrus is typically the hardest battle, so you usually rare candy before him, meaning that Volkner's team just gets crushed, especially when you have a Pokemon like this that learns Earthquake. Alright, before the league, let's switch back to Arceus and catch up. In this case, in the snowy region, there's this little house with a hiker inside of it. He says he dropped an HM, but if you talk to him after picking up Rock Climb outside of the house, he will just give you an Icicle Plate, which of course boosts the power of Ice-type moves and will turn Arceus into an Ice-type. I figured this is perfect because the Ice-type resists itself, so I can use this advantage against Candace. By the way, this is the first plate where I really noticed that the darker elements on Arceus, like the stripe up the side of its face, those also change color when you equip a different plate. It is really noticeable here with the Icicle Plate because everything is this sort of nice light blue color. At the beginning of this battle, I'm just buying time because I'm setting up with Swords Dance. I wanted to boost my attack high enough that I would be sure that Aerial Ace one-shot the Frostlass. It has Snow Cloak and I don't want a chance missing. I knock out the Sneasel at +4 and then move on to the rest of her team. Piloswine goes down to 1 return. Next she sends in Abomasnow, establishing the hail. It falls to 1 hit as well, leading to Frostlass. And of course, Aerial Ace has the damage required. While we watch the second Cyrus battle, I'm just going to briefly reflect on how Arceus is doing. So far, really well. It wasn't great in the early game, but as soon as I got access to Swords Dance, it has started to steamroll. As you can see here, I just get set up to +2 and then crush everything. Cyrus in the distortion world is a little bit different though. He leads with a Houndoom, which can use Will-O-Wisp to cut your attack in half. Well, cut your damage from physical moves in half. It doesn't work like it used to work in Generation 1. Because of that, I decide to knock it out right away without setting up. Then he sends in Honchkrow, and here is where I choose to set up my Swords Dances. Since the boss Pokemon is not doing very much damage, I could have set up more, but I decided that wasn't the thing that was best in terms of speed running. I just want to sweep from here on out. Even with my attack lowered by Intimidate on the Gyarados, I am still able to one-shot it. Weavile goes down to a single hit. By the way, Arceus is faster than every Pokemon in the game from here on out because it has 170 speed. Last is Crobat, and I one-shot. Cyrus was trivial. And so is Volkner. Actually, wait, we gotta rewind a little bit. I'm getting ahead of myself. Before him, I was able to pick up the Zap Plate, which will allow Arceus to convert to an electric type. But honestly, that typing is not great for the league. After taking on a Blissey, I clear Victory Road, and here is where I can pick up the Sky Plate, which I do think is gonna be relevant. Because with the Flying type, I will have same type attack bonus Aerial Ace, which is super effective against Aaron's team, and then I am immune to Bertha's attacks. Okay, rival battle before the league. Now, Arceus is not going to have problems here. I think that should be clear to all of you. I'm a decent level, 61. Again, really on the low side of things for Pokemon Platinum. That said, I have Swords Dance, and that can make up for being under-leveled, especially when the Staraptor just isn't doing enough damage. With only +1, I decide to sweep, and spoiler alert, this is enough. While we watch the battle play out, let me talk about the 4 remaining plates I have failed to mention up until now in the video. The Earth Plate, the Stone Plate, the Flame Plate, and the Splash Plate. The Earth Plate is obtainable in the basement of Orberg Gate. This requires Rock Smash, Surf, and Strength, and it's also a lot of backtracking. For most Pokemon, picking up the soft sand along the way of the main quest is far more efficient. So generally this item is not one that I want to pick up, and I don't really think I need an immunity to electric type moves. Sorry Volkner, you're just not very good. The Stone Plate is obtainable in Mount Coronet. You need Waterfall in order to access it, as well as Rock Climb. By the way, I just want to do a shout out to everyone who makes these videos on YouTube that show you how to collect all of these items visually. Every time I read the description on Bulbapedia or a similar website, I have no idea where I should go. So I search up one of these videos and then I can see the path myself, and that's so helpful. So thank you so much for doing this public service. I don't think the typing from the Stone Plate is particularly relevant for Arceus, so I skipped over it. The Flame Plate is where things start to get really awkward. You can get this on Stark Mountain or in Orberg Mine, but only this second location if the player has an Arceus in their party. So I would have access to it, but I don't need it for the type. This does leave Pokemon with fire type moves at a unique disadvantage because getting this plate is so much more difficult. And making matters worse, the charcoal is only available in the post game as well, so we're not going to get fire damage boosting items. The last plate is the Splash Plate, which is available after you get Surf in this sort of little bottom location. I also didn't think the time investment was worth it to pick this one up, so I decided to skip it by because the water type isn't really useful for me. Okay, now with the rival defeated, we need to see how Giratina does against him, and the answer is very well. No problems here. Despite the Floatzel having Ice Fang, I just one-shot with Dragon Pulse, which I picked up in Victory Road. This is one subtle advantage that Giratina has when playing against Arceus. It can blend its moveset between special moves and physical moves. I don't have to centralize around one of the two just because I don't have a setup move. So right now I'm holding on to Shockwave, and then I also have Earthquake and Shadow Force for physical coverage. After crushing the rival, I can finally say it is time for the Elite Four to finish off the runs for both of these two legendaries. Typically Aaron is not very good, but I get frozen right away, luckily defrosting and then knocking out his initial Drapion. Beyond that, I two-shot the Scizor. Pretty much all of his Pokemon are two-shots actually, so Giratina is taking some damage from each of them. But his team gets progressively worse and the Vespiquen is last. I pull through with a victory even though I'm on orange health. Bertha is where, I don't really have any other way of saying it. Things get a little bit unfortunate for Giratina. I'm not able to one-hit, which is the same case that I had against Aaron, but here that's very problematic because the Hippowdon has Yawn. It puts me to sleep by the time the Rhyperior comes out, and then I get crushed by Earthquake and Sandstorm. Not great. I'm gonna use my rare candies. I have 5 of them available right now, so I can go up from 66 to 71 before trying her again. I was hoping this would give me the damage to one-shot her team. I do on the Whiscash, but not the Gliscor or the Hippowdon again. This time it doesn't use Yawn, but instead damages me with Crunch, which is, of course, physical and super effective. By the time I reach the Rhyperior, I'm on red health because of Sandstorm, and Earthquake doesn't do enough damage to one-shot. In the next battle, once again, Hippowdon puts me to sleep with Yawn. She uses a full restore, making things even more annoying, and this ends in a very similar way, on low health by the time I reach Rhyperior, with it knocking me out. So I hate to say this, Giratina wins because it gets a critical hit with Shadow Force and knocks out the Hippowdon in a single hit. Because of that, I don't get hit by a Crunch or a Yawn. Then I use Dragon Pulse against the Rhyperior, hoping for more damage, but it looks like it's doing about the same, maybe a tiny bit more. Still, after a Citrus Berry, I am able to knock out her ace. Moving on to the final Pokemon, Golem. As long as Giratina can survive a hit, I've made it by her, and I do. So, Flint. Yeah, I just spam Earthquake and all of his Pokemon faint. This one is incredibly easy. And so is Lucian that's next. Over the course of the year, I have learned to respect him, and I've also learned to know that the Alakazam is in fact the fastest Pokemon in all of Pokemon Platinum. It has 156 speed, so it's a little bit faster than Cynthia's Garchomp and Cyrus's Crobat. But of course today, I'm faster than it and Shadow Force one-shots. Gallade is easy to clean up, and with it out of the way, it's time to prepare for Cynthia. To do this, I felt I needed a move that was going to be super effective against the Milotic and do more damage than Shockwave, so I teach Thunderbolt in its place. Okay, time for Cynthia. As far as champions go, I have learned throughout this year that she's really strong in regular playthroughs, but in solo challenges, she's really not that good. She hasn't kept up with the fact that I have 20 rare candies at my disposal. Giratina is in the low 70s for this battle, Shadow Force can one-hit the Spiritomb, Dragon Pulse takes care of the Garchomp in a single hit, Lucario falls to Earthquake. Then against the Milotic, I realized that Thunderbolt actually isn't helpful here. Shadow Force is just going to do more damage, so I go for it and one hit. Roserade falls to Shadow Force, but then I want to use Thunderbolt on the Togekiss, so I guess it has a niche here. I have to two-hit, and when her final Pokemon falls, Giratina clocks in with a time of 2 hours, 7 minutes, and 30 seconds, with 7 resets, 0 blackouts at level 73, with a game time of 6 hours and 24 minutes. Last year I had a time of 2 hours, 20 minutes, and 50 seconds. 6 resets, so 1 less, and I finished the game 3 levels higher. My game time was 6 hours and 28 minutes, so 4 minutes slower. I think that I have learned some things. I wasn't able to bring the game time down as much as I was hoping for, but the real time is significantly lower this year. And I don't think that's primarily related to skill. I think this time improvement is largely because I have faster computer hardware this year. Platinum does not emulate at maximum frames per second all the time. It varies greatly, and so having a better computer with better single-threaded performance really does improve my performance in these games. Anyways, it's nice to see that Giratina was able to improve its results. But now the question is, will Arceus be able to beat this time? Well, Aaron is first. Swords Dance, Skyplate, Aerial Ace, and yeah, he's no problem. Bertha is next. She can't hit me with ground type moves, which is fantastic. I can set up with Swords Dance, and then at +4 I go for the sweep. On Golem, I misclick using Return. Obviously that's not the move I'm supposed to use, so I take some damage from Thunder Punch before knocking it out. Rhyperior follows, Earthquake one-shots, and from there I clean up the remainder of her Pokemon. Return for Gliscor and the Hippowdon. I guess Flint could burn me, so let's not give him a chance, instead just spam Earthquake and one-shot all of his Pokemon. Well, what could Lucian do? He's most likely going to set up Reflect and Light Screen from the Mr. Mime, so why don't I just take my time with Swords Dance, go to +4, and then sweep his team? Yeah, easy victory again for Arceus. Okay, I want everyone to let this sink in. I'm gonna open my bag now and show you how many rare candies I have left over. There are still 9 hanging out here. Arceus is level 64. I could have saved so much time just not picking these up throughout the playthrough, but I didn't know that that was going to be safe. With a slow growth rate, I wanted to play on the more conservative side of things. Still, I want to see if this is possible for Arceus, so let's go into the champion battle at this level. And I think it is, because Spiritomb is first, it's very defensive, and it's going to give me time to set up with Swords Dance. I'm still still using the Sky Plate because I figured switching away from it just didn't make sense. That's a little bit of time that I don't want to spend. At +4, I was feeling confident. I knock out the Spiritomb with an Aerial Ace and move on to the Togekiss. Return gets a 1-hit, my Lodic goes down to Return as well, and then Earthquake manages the Lucario. What about Garchomp? Well, I go for Return and get a 1-hit. Simple, Roserade's all that's left, so Arceus cleans it up and clocks in with a dominant first playthrough, a time of 2 hours, 4 minutes, and 2 seconds, with 5 resets, 0 blackouts at level 65, with a game time of 6 hours and 22 minutes. Okay, here are the timeline graphs for Arceus' playthrough and Giratina's playthrough. Arceus is the victor with the faster time. It did so quite dominantly as well. If I cut the rare candies out, this time would be even lower, and with Giratina, cutting the rare candies would have caused more problems. I think this comparison shows a couple of things. Having a good early moveset is important, but it's not the most important thing. If you get a setup move, then you really can cut significant levels by the time you reach the end game, and that saves far more time than having an advantage in the early game. If we look at the level by trainer graph, you can really see this playing out. In the early game, Giratina skirts by most of the trainers at a low level, but then by the time I arrive at Wake, it's at a higher level, things go back and forth throughout the mid-game section, and then by the late game, Giratina requires a higher level, whereas Arceus just kind of levels off and crushes everyone. Interestingly enough, if we look at game time by trainer, things are a little bit different. Giratina had a much lower game time throughout the majority of the game, but by the very end, Arceus had eclipsed it. Although if I did these playthroughs again, I think that Arceus would significantly outperform. There are a bunch of candies that take a lot of time that I just wouldn't have to invest in. Okay, now let's look at the splits because I think this tells a very interesting story. Giratina was ahead throughout the majority of the run, and not by an insubstantial amount of time. It peaked after Maylene with a lead of 9 minutes and 37 seconds. But then slowly over the next section of the game, especially because of Swords Dance, Arceus gained back time, until Bertha really changed the course of this run. That put Arceus ahead by 3 minutes and 9 seconds. If I had found a better solution for Giratina against her in the moment, then maybe this would have been much closer, because the Aaron split, these two were only 46 seconds apart, with Giratina being slightly in the lead. I contemplated with Giratina maybe using a move like Hidden Power to get super effective damage against Bertha's Pokemon, but the Hippowdon is a mono ground type, so with super effective damage I would still be doing less than a move like Shadow Force. Although the Hippowdon is massively defensive and not so specially defensive, so using a move like Hidden Power Ice could really help here. Okay, before I place Arceus in the tier list, let's compare its results against my Garchomp run when I started fully evolved. That was in last week's video, and Garchomp did very well. Like, very well. And in this case, it actually beat Arceus by a significant margin. These timeline graphs tell quite the story. Arceus was going into the Volcaner split by the time Garchomp had finished the game. So what's going on here? Why was Garchomp so much better? And the answer is Dragon Rage. In the early game, Garchomp just stomps everything in one hit, whereas Arceus is having to fumble around with moves like Punishment that only have 5 PP. So a Dragon type like Giratina was able to get an advantage over Arceus in the early game, but not significantly so. But then it fell behind later in the game because it didn't have Swords Dance. And Garchomp comes in and solves both of these problems. Dragon Rage in the early game so it can compete with a Pokemon like Giratina, and then in the late game it has Swords Dance just like Arceus. So if we add the Garchomp species run into this mix, then we can see this full story playing out. It's really surprising to see both Arceus and Giratina, the legendaries, outperformed significantly so by a pseudo-legendary. Although I should admit that the Garchomp playthrough, while labeled Garchomp 1 here, is the first playthrough I did with Garchomp when starting fully evolved. I did have the experience of playing the Garchomp line prior to this, so it's kind of like a 1.5 playthrough, and Giratina is the second playthrough, so definitely out of these three, Arceus was the most disadvantaged from an experiential perspective. Okay, so it's tier list time, and reflected in these results, we have Garchomp's time when it started as a Gible. When considering those first playthrough results, now Arceus does outperform. And today, it earns itself the only S tier placement with my new thresholds. It reigns supreme above all the other runs that I have done so far. If you support me on Patreon or through YouTube memberships, thank you so much, it means the world to me. I hope you've all enjoyed Pokemon Platinum this year. I've been learning the game as I didn't play these games growing up as a kid, and it's been really refreshing for me getting away from the games that I'm really attached to nostalgically. After this year, I'm starting to form some memories with these games, and I am really excited to build more next year in Generation 4 in general. That's it for this one. If you have made it this far, you are incredible. Daily December continues tomorrow. I'll see you then.